Hello, I'm Donal McCauley and welcome to this BMJ Leader Conversation, where we talk to the key opinion leaders in health and medicine around the world. Today we're in Cape Town and I'm talking to one of the most exciting new voices in medical leadership. Mumta Hargovan is a doctor, a researcher, and I suppose you would call her a key medical influencer. Tell me a little bit about your career so far.
So I started off at medical school, along with many of my colleagues, wanting to really do something good in the world, wanting to help people, and then getting out into the working world and being completely overwhelmed with the magnitude of the problems that end up inevitably in the health system. I've worked in various settings in South Africa across urban, rural, different levels of the health system, from primary to tertiary care. And it left me feeling quite despondent because you feel quite helpless seeing similar problems again and again, dealing with them on an individual level in a clinical setting, in a hospital setting, but really feeling powerless against the real root causes behind a lot of these very preventable health conditions. That's what led me to public health and doing a master's in public health, which was a breath of fresh air. It allowed me to step back, see the bigger picture, see that change was in fact happening on a national level, the health system infrastructure that's being improved, the types of public health policies that are coming in, and really get a sense of momentum and hope. After doing that, I thought public health was as big as you could go, but I came across the concept of planetary health. And this was my next big leap into an area that I knew nothing about, but that just made so much sense to me that now that I know about planetary health, I can't go back. I think in being a doctor and being in public health, I felt like there was more than enough on my plate, and I couldn't possibly even think about the environment as well. That felt like that should be someone else's job. It's just too much for one person to have to think about. And I lived in that kind of a blissful, willful ignorance for most of my life. But the rose-tinted lenses have been taken off, and the planetary health field has really helped me to see how these things are so interconnected and we need to break down those silos and think about more than one issue at a time. So that's where I am now in the field of planetary health.
Now, you have a most unusual job description. A knowledge partner. What's a knowledge partner, and where do you work? What is Douglas Communications?
So currently I have two jobs. The first is as a knowledge partner at Douglas Knowledge Partners, which is a strategic consultancy based in Cape Town. And what we do is work with clients across all sectors to try and help them to consolidate or communicate their ideas. And we really believe that, ideas matter, and amplifying those ideas can have a profound impact on the world. And in my role there, I do try and bring my public health and planetary health types of thinking and the frameworks I've learned from that to incorporate that across different topic areas. The second job that I have is as leader of the South African Hub of Women Leaders for Planetary Health. This is an organization I'm particularly proud of. We only launched last year, but we've grown in numbers, and we've got a network of amazing women who are looking to be leaders across different spaces and apply the planetary health framework in their spaces.
When you describe these women leaders, are these women who are in healthcare or outside healthcare? Give us a flavor of what the movement is like.
The movement started with a series of workshops to introduce the concept of planetary health, which isn't that well known in South Africa and is only just starting to kind of gain grounds in academic spaces, but not so much outside of that. So as I began learning about planetary health, I developed a series of workshops to capture my learnings, but also to share them. And the women that have been attracted to this program are from all kinds of disciplines. We've had teachers, engineers, writers, as well as doctors and public health experts, and also planetary health experts. So it's really a space of co-learning and discussion where there's no kind of power hierarchy, because I am certainly not proclaiming to be the expert. It's more of a facilitated space to engage with these ideas in a way that's not overwhelming, and in a way that, most importantly, is hopeful, and acts as a more supportive kind of bubble than some of the very overwhelming literature out there and the news, which of course can be very discouraging.
So let me bring you back to your other role, and that's as a knowledge partner, because in medicine, we don't really hear a lot about the communication industry. So tell us what you do there.
So I wear many hats in that job. It's a bit of project management, it's a bit of writing, a bit of editing, and really developing relationships with clients to help them bring forward their ideas. I agree, it is a most unusual path for a doctor to end up in a communications consultancy. But what I've realized on my journey is that so many of the skills that doctors build along the way, that sometimes we don't even recognize that we have, are incredibly useful to other industries. One of those is our ability to connect with people. As a doctor, it doesn't matter who walks in the door, whether they're someone who's homeless, a prisoner, a president, it doesn't matter. You see the humanity, and you're able to have a conversation with them. You also, as a junior doctor, have to phone, a high-profile professor at the tertiary hospital and be able to express yourself clearly, calmly, while there could be a critical patient in front of you, and that type of communication is what makes us quite adaptable to very different working environments.
Now, I'm going to ask you, it's not a trick question, but it's an interesting question, because I saw on your Twitter account you describe yourself as a raging feminist. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm so glad you picked that up, because I love talking about that. So I have been a feminist for most of my life, but I was a very quiet feminist. I observed what was going on around me, injustices within my own family, within my community, and of course, South Africa has one of the highest rates of gender-based violence in the world. But I found that when you talk about these things, there's often such a backlash, and that caused me to shut down about it for a while. Until I read a book called Rage Becomes Her by Soraya Chimali. And this book is really a love letter to anger, which as a woman, you're taught is a negative emotion. It's unattractive. It's inappropriate for a woman to express anger. But the point that is made in this book is that anger is what has really been behind every big social movement to date, because anger is what sparks action. And in that sense, it's not a negative thing. It's valid. And we should be feeling angry about injustices in the world, whether it's poverty, whether it's gender inequality, racial inequality, homophobia. These are things that should make us angry. And that's why I proudly proclaim to be a raging feminist. I'm angry about the issues in the world, but also it gives me joy to be a feminist and to connect with other women to try and tackle these issues.
And what do you think about the role of women in medicine? The proportion of women is increasing. Are there still problems in medicine?
Definitely. I would definitely say medicine can be a tricky space for women to navigate. I feel like my generation has grown up in a time where in school we were taught that we were equal, but increasingly as we face the real world, we see that we are still treated differently. I remember being in a class in medical school and being told by a professor that the women in the class are a waste of time because they're all going to drop out and get pregnant, and so they shouldn't even be there. And this is current. This is in our generation. Another example is, we had a lecturer who was a little handsy in doing clinical demonstrations, with students volunteering to, demonstrate certain clinical skills. And at that time, you're just not empowered to speak up. You're not empowered. You don't know who to go to. You don't know what the backlash is going to be. And that's just getting through medical school. When you enter the health system, sexism is rampant, whether it's the security guard catcalling you as a doctor on your way into the hospital, or, you know, treatment by patients, treatment by colleagues. It's something that isn't spoken about enough, and women feel like they just have to deal with it, and it's part of life, it's part of the job, but it really doesn't have to be.
So there are two components to what you say. One is the sort of overt sexism, but then there's the covert sexism in terms of promotion in medicine and equality at the highest level. How can we encourage that? How can we promote women in medicine?
Often the answer that comes to this is supporting women and developing women. And that, of course, is one side of it, but it also places the onus and the burden on women as though they're the problem when they're not. They are fully capable of leadership and they should be in those positions. And that is what this organization, Women Leaders for Planetary Health, is saying. It's saying that women should be there, because we can't be making decisions for the whole planet with only men at the decision-making table. But that's where the other component is, where it's that these higher level decision-making spaces need to start transforming in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of inclusivity of all types. And it's only when there's that higher level buy-in and people start shifting these perceptions of who should and who shouldn't be in a decision-making space that we can move forward.
One of the things we heard here talked about in politics are having quotas. Should there be quotas in medicine in terms of consultants or professors, or in terms of research grants?
I think this is quite a tricky issue, especially coming from South Africa, where quotas are in place and have been in place for some time. I do think in our setting, especially coming out of apartheid, it is a necessary thing to kind of recognize that, you know, that there's injustices that have been generational, and have, you know, excluded people from certain types of spaces. It's more difficult to comment on a global context, just recognizing that the situation is different in every country. But certainly in South Africa, I do think it's making an impact that women of color are being prioritized for certain positions. But the challenge there is that it's not simply a tick box exercise, but rather a meaningful engagement, and involves a mentorship or some kind of, you know, process to make sure you're not putting people in positions that they aren't ready for just for the sake of ticking a box. And I think that's something that, you know, in South African healthcare system, we're definitely working on.
Mumta, your name came up associated with the Youth Innovation Award. Tell me about it.
So this is a youth innovation essay competition that is run by my current employer, Douglas Knowledge Partners. And last year I came across it. I thought it looked fascinating and I decided to enter. I wrote an essay about gender-based violence in South Africa and the need to kind of have a more cohesive health system response. As it currently stands, you know, the health system is the first point of contact for women who are facing domestic violence and other types of abuse. But the health system is very poorly connected with the legal system, with the social services, and all the other financial services, etc., that a woman in that position needs. And so the care we are able to provide is extremely limited. And it's up to the woman to now have to navigate across these very different services. So my essay proposed, you know, a way to bring a more cohesive approach to this issue. It was through the competition that I met my new employer, and I'm really fortunate that this year, as an alumni of the competition, as an alumnus, I am running this year's competition and I got to choose the theme. So of course I chose planetary health. The idea behind the competition is that there are quite a lot of fellowships and prizes out there for startups and for people who've got great business ideas and grant funding competitions and that sort of thing. But the gap that we wanted to fill is as a communications competition. So really encouraging young people to take an idea that they have, take the time to write it down in a powerful way, and develop those types of skills in young people. As part of the competition, you go through a mentorship phase where you're linked with someone who's either a content expert in the type of work that you've done, or has expertise in writing and in communication. And through that support, you then get to improve upon your essay and submit it for a final round. So for me, this was a really valuable experience because of just the power of how the written word can shape hearts and minds. And that's what it's all about. It's really a development opportunity specifically to help people communicate for impact.
So overall, in terms of your various roles, are you optimistic for the future of women in healthcare and women in planetary health?
Definitely. I would definitely say that there is momentum building. It gives me great pride to see women stepping into leadership roles throughout Africa, and they're often at the forefront of climate change activism wherever you look, advocating for better infrastructure for their communities in terms of agriculture, in terms of food security. They're really at the front line of leading change. And that gives me a lot of hope. The barrier that still needs to be broken is at the high level positions that are still very male dominated. But overall, I think working with this organization and kind of seeing what women are doing in their spaces definitely makes me hopeful.
And a final question, which is probably an impossible question to answer, and that is, how do you see the future of the North-South divide?
I think there is a new wave of Africans doing it for Africans, Africans taking ownership of our challenges and working towards the solutions and trying to cut off this sort of toxic post-colonial reliance that we often have in terms of Western aid. Where I've seen that is the recent Africa Impact Summit, which was really all about how do we unlock the potential of our own people, of our own businesses. And we have the solutions, we've got the creativity, we've got the innovations. And the more those sort of conversations start to happen, I think the harder it will be for, traditionally exploitative and extractive types of input from the North will stop being such a big influence, such a barrier to development in Africa.
Mumta, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. We've covered some pretty serious and major issues. We've only scratched the surface. But all I can say is I would like to share your optimism, and with refreshing new leaders like you, well, I think the future is bright. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.